children, the plan is War and Peace, Leo Tolstoy, and Elder Scrolls Oblivion. It's gonna be live.
In a world where chaos reigns and energy seems fleeting, one visionary investigates to bring us all together when theater lived after dark. Harnessing the transformative power of artificial intelligence, the timeless charm of radio theater. The wisdom of books, and the excitement of video games. Zoom Theater Live After Dark illuminates the path to enlightenment and fosters a sense of unity among its audience. Through this unique fusion of storytelling and interactive experiences, we aim to nurture personal growth, improve learning, and inspire a peaceful existence. Guided by your obedient servant, Sebastian Smalls, we embark on a journey in self-discovery. But where do we begin? Begin by simply listening, slow down, see just how peaceful today can be. Together, we shall create a harmonious community bound by shared passion and a desire to elevate the human experience. Sebastian Smalls will be there, to the end of the line, my Valentine, guiding you on this journey towards a more serene and enlightened smile. Catch you guys on the flip side.
Begin by simply listening, slow down, see just how peaceful today can be. Thanks so much for swinging by. I am your host, your obedient servant, Sebastian Smalls. The plan for this one is War and Peace, Leo Tolstoy, and Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Thanks again for swinging by. Wish us luck.
Hi. Hello, good afternoon. I'm Charlotte, and I figured I would start this little channel to use for reading because with everything going on with a global pandemic and so many people being homebound, I thought it's a good time to catch up on some reading that I've been putting aside, and I couldn't think of anything better than to spend an interminate amount of time on than Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. It's a pretty hefty tome, so I figured since I have all this time on my hands, why not get started? Why not share it with you guys? So I'm going to be reading a little bit every day or so and keep it up on my channel so you can stream in the background as you fall asleep. This is something that was just sitting around the house. A little background, the preface, War and Peace, Leo Tolstoy. This translation is from the original Russian by Richard Pavir and Larissa Volokonsky. And I will probably butcher the Russian names. I'm very sorry. If I stumble through any of them on a read, I will be sure to look up proper pronunciation and hopefully correct it on the next reading. So, thank you for being here. And let's just dive right in. I think introductions are lame. Especially if they're not actually written by the original author. So I'm going to skip through the introduction. And there's a list of characters. Boring. Okay, so 2 minutes in, and let's actually get started with the meat of it. Volume 1, Part 1. Eh bien, mon prince, jeunesse et Lucas ne sont plus que des épingeurs de estats de la famille Bonaparte. Non, je vous préviens que si vous ne me dites pas noces avant la guerre. Si vous permettez encore de les parler tous les infamies, toutes les atrocités de cet antéchrist, ma parole, je crois, je ne vous connais plus, vous n'êtes plus ami, vous n'êtes plus my faithful slave, comme vous dites. Well, good evening. Je vois que je vois sit down and tell me about it. I didn't know there was going to be French. Sorry. So spoke in July 1805 the renowned Anna Pavlovna Scherer, maid of the honor and intimate of the Empress Maria Fedorovna, greeting the important and high-ranking Prince Vasily, the first to arrive at her soiree. Anna Pavlovna had been coughing for several days. She had the grippe, as she put it. Grippe was a new word then, used only by rare people. Little notes had been sent out that morning with a red-liveried footman, and on all of them, without distinction, there was written, Si vous n'avez rien de mieux à faire, monsieur le comte, ou mon prince, et c'est la perspective de passer la soirée chez un parfait malade, ne vous effrayez pas trop. Je serai charmé de vous voir chez moi entre 7 et 10 heures. Annette Scherer. Dieu, quelle virulente sortie! The entering prince replied, not ruffled in the least by such a reception. He was wearing an embroidered court uniform, stockings, shoes, and stars, and had a bright expression on his flat face. He spoke that refined French in which our grandparents not only spoke, but thought, and though with those quiet, patronizing intonations which are proper to a significant man who has grown old in society and at court. He went over to Anna Pavlovna, kissed her hand, presenting her with his perfumed and shining bald pate, settled comfortably on the sofa. Avant tout, dites-moi comment vous allez, chère amie. Set me at ease, he said, without changing his voice, and in a tone which, through propriety and sympathy, one could discern indifference and even mockery. How can one be well when one suffers morally? It is impossible to remain at ease in our time if one has any feeling, said Anna Pavlovna. You'll stay the whole evening, I hope? And the fete at the British ambassador's? Today is Wednesday. I must put in my appearance, said the prince. My daughter will come and fetch me and take me there. I thought tonight's fete was cancelled. Je vous avoue que tout ce fete et tout ce fut des artifices commencement à devenir insipidis. If they had known that you wished it, the fete would have been cancelled, said the prince, uttering out of habit, like a wound-up clock, things that he did not even wish people to believe. Ne me trompez pas, à bien, que on décide par rapport à la dépêche de nouvelles. Vous savez tout. What can I tell you? Said the prince in a cold, bored tone. Quand on ne décide que Bonaparte est brûlé ses vaisseaux, et je crois que nous sommes en train de brûler les nôtres. Prince Vasily always spoke lazily, the way an actor speaks a role in an old play. Anna Pavlovna Scherer, on the contrary, spoke, despite her 40s, was brimming with animation and impulse. Being an enthusiast had become her social position, and she sometimes became enthusiastic even when she had no wish to, so as not to deceive the expectations of people who knew her. The restrained smile that constantly played on Anna Pavlovna's face, though it did not suit her outworn features, expressed, as it does in spoiled children, a constant awareness of her dear shortcomings which she did not wish, could not, and found no need to correct. In the midst of a conversation about political doings, Anna Pavlovna waxed vehement. Don't speak to me of Austria. Maybe I don't understand anything, but Austria does not want and has never wanted war. She's betraying us. Russia alone must be the savior of Europe. Our benefactor knows his lofty calling and will be faithful to it. That is the one thing I trust in. Our kind and wonderful sovereign is faced with the greatest role in the world, and he is so virtuous and good that God will not abandon him, and he will fulfill his calling to crush the hydra of revolution, which has now become still more terrible in the person of this murderer and villain. We alone must redeem the blood of the righteous one. In whom can we trust, I ask you? England with her commercial spirit will not and cannot understand all the loftiness of the Emperor Alexander's soul. She refused to evacuate Malta. She wants to see. She searches for ulterior motives in our act. What did they say to Novosiltsov? Nothing. They did not. They could not understand the self-denial of our emperor, who wants nothing for himself and everything for the good of the world. And what have they promised? Nothing. And what did they promise that will not be done? Prussia has already declared that Bonaparte is invincible and that all Europe can do nothing against him. I don't believe a single word of Hardenberg or of Haugwitz. Cette fameuse neutrale Prussienne, ce n'est que cringe. I trust only in God and in the lofty destiny of our dear emperor. He will save Europe. She suddenly stopped with a mocking smile at her own vehemence. I think, the prince said, smiling, that if they sent you instead of our dear Winzingerode, you would take the Prussian king's consent by storm. You're so eloquent. Will you give me tea? At once. À propos, she said, calming down again. I'll have two very interesting men here tonight. Le Vicomte de Montemont. Il est allé hors Montmorency par le Rhin. One of the best French families. He's one of the good émigrés, one of the real ones. And then l'Abbé Montriot. Do you know that profound mind? He's been received by the sovereign. Do you know him? I'll be very glad, said the prince. Tell me, he added, as if just recalling something, and with special casualness, thought what he asked about was the main purpose of his visit. Is it true, l'Emeritus Maire wants Baron Funk to be named the first secretary in Vienna? C'est son paroisseur, ce baron a ce qu'il parfait. Prince Vasily wanted his son to be appointed to this post, which, though the Empress Maria Fedorovna had been solicited for the baron, through the Empress Maria Fedorovna had been solicited for the baron. Anna Pavlovna all but closed her eyes as a sign that neither she nor anyone else could judge of the Empress's good pleasure or liking. Monsieur le Baron de Funk it recommend elle impératrice mais pas son sûr. She merely said in a sad, dry tone. The moment Anna Pavlovna mentioned the Empress, her face suddenly presented a profound and sincere expression of devotion and respect, combined with sadness, which happened each time she referred to her exalted patroness in conversation. She said that Her Majesty had deigned to show Baron Funk beaucoup d'estime, and her eyes again clouded over with sadness. The prince lapsed into indifferent silence. Anna Pavlovna, with her courtly and feminine adroitness and ready tact, wanted both to swat the prince for daring to make such a pronouncement about a person recommended to the Empress, and at the same time to comfort him. Mais à propos de votre famille, she said, do you know that your daughter, since her coming out, fait les délices de tout le monde? On la trouve belle comme le jour. The prince bowed in a sign of respect and gratitude. I often think, Anna Pavlovna went on after a moment's silence, moving closer to the prince and smiling tenderly at him, as if to show thereby that the political and social conversations were at an end and a heart-to-heart one was beginning. I often think how unfairly life's good fortune is sometimes distributed. Why has fate given you two such nice children, excluding Anatoly, your youngest? I don't like him, she put in peremptorily. raising her eyebrows. Such lovely children, and you really value them less than anyone and are therefore unworthy of them. And she smiled her rapturous smile. Que voulez-vous? La lecture aurait dit que je n'ai pas la bourse de la paternité, said the prince. Stop joking. I want to talk seriously with you. You know I'm displeased with your younger son. Just between us, her face acquired a sad look. There was talk about him at Her Majesty's, and you were pitied. The prince did not reply, but she fell silent, looking at him significantly, waiting for a reply. Prince Vasily winced. What am I to do? He said finally. You know I did all a father could for their upbringing, and they both turned out des imbéciles. Hippolyte is at least an untroublesome fellow, but Anatoly is a troublesome one. That's the only difference, he said, smiling more unnaturally and animatedly than usual, and with that showing especially clearly in the wrinkles that formed around his mouth something unexpectedly coarse and disagreeable. Why do such people as you have children? You weren't a father. If you weren't a father, I'd have nothing to reproach you for, said Anna Pavlovna, raising her eyes pensively. Je suis votre faithful slave, et vous seul je peux la avoir. My children, ce sont les entrées de mon existence. That's my cross. I explain it that way to myself. Que voulez-vous? He paused, expressing with a gesture his submission to the cruel fate. Anna Pavlovna fell to thinking. Have you never thought of getting your prodigal son Anatoly married? They say, she observed, that old maids ont la manie de mariages. I don't feel that I have that weakness yet, but I know one petite personne who is very unhappy with her father. Une parente à nous, une princesse Bolokonsky. Prince Vasily did not reply, though with the quickness of grasp and memory characteristic of society people, he showed by a nod of the head that he had taken this information into account. No, you know this Anatoly costs me 40,000 a year, he said, obviously unable to restrain the melancholy course of his thoughts. He paused. How will it be in 5 years if it goes on like this? Voilà l'avantage d'être Pierre. Is she rich, this princess of yours? Her father is very rich and stingy. He lives in the country. You know, it's the famous Prince Bolkonsky, already retired under the late emperor and nicknamed the King of Prussia. He's a very intelligent man, but an odd and difficult one. Le pauvre petit est malheureux comme le père. She has a brother, Kutuzov's adjunct, the one who recently married Lise Menin. He'll come tonight. Écoutez, chérie Annette, said the prince, suddenly taking his interlocutor by the hands and pulling it down for some reason. Arrangement cette affaire, et je suis votre faithful slave à tout jamais. Slave comme mon village headman. Écrite des reports. F instead of T. She's from a good family and rich, that's all I need. And with those free and familiarly graceful moments which distinguished him, he took the maid of honor's hand, kissed it, and having kissed it, waved the maid of honorly's hand a little, sprawled himself in an armchair, and looked away. Attendez, Anna Pavlovna said ponderingly. Tonight I'll discuss it with Lise, the femme de Jean Bolonsky, and maybe something can be settled. C'est dans votre famille que je ferai mon apprentissage de ville fille. And that was a really rough part one. I didn't realize it'd be so much French. So my apologies for the horrible pronunciation. I think I'll stop there. I think that's enough for one day. A good 15 minutes of poor pronunciation is more than I should put most people through. But if you have any thoughts or recommendations, feel free to drop them in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for dropping by. We got through that much. I don't know if you can see. And most of that was the introduction, so hopefully I think we'll have enough quarantine for a bit of this. Thanks. Bye.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We're back again with more War and Peace. Again, I'm Charlotte, and spending some quality quarantine time with Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. I figured I'd have the time to finally crack this bad boy open. If you weren't here yesterday, last time, I just read the very first section with the degree of terror at all the French that was in it. I like to think I know some French, but definitely not that much, as friends of mine who do speak French were quick to point out and laugh at me about. And I got some explanation from a friend in New Zealand who also, among other things, did give me this amazing shirt that I have slightly destroyed, but still love. Hey, Yulia. Yulia speaks Russian and was saying that it was very common to speak French in Russia. I think she said in the
Blair Witch
17th and 18th century. Could be wrong. Definitely at least the 1800s. But speak French in Russia if you were wealthy or upper class. So a little bit of history on that. So Leo Tolstoy, though, is pulling no punches. I thought it would just be tough French or Russian names that I'd have to worry about. And here he has paragraphs of French for me to stumble through. So my apologies. I think there's less French in this next section. Basically, I'm reading till my arm gets tired of holding this book. So there's that. We'll still read a little bit more today. And then after today, we'll stay tuned until Monday for more. Recap last time. Just an opening scene of Anna Pavlovna, who's like a socialite, having a meeting with... I was offered some pizza. It's for me, but it's not for me right now. Anyway, so Anna Pavlovna having a little soiree at her place with a Prince Vasily, who has 3 kids that he doesn't really care that much about. And Anatoly is his youngest and a bit of a troublemaker. She doesn't like him, so they're trying to set him up with some rich guy's daughter just so he can be out of his dad's hair. That's all the excitement we've had so far, other than my horrible French. Also, I've noticed there is some footnotes for the French, so I could alternately read the English translation of the French if you guys wanted me to. So you probably have to jump in the comments and say, okay, enough with your French. Also, what are they saying? And then maybe I'll just read the French or the English translation of the French in place of. But I feel like that might mess up the flow and also lose a little bit of the flavor of the novel. But then again, it's also nice to know what people are saying. But, a little bit of mystery. Either way, I'm going to read it as is right now without any of the translations. I'll get through hopefully a part or two. And before we call it a day. So this is Volume 1, Part 1, Section 2. Let's just jump right in, shall we? Anna Pavlovna's drawing room gradually began to fill up. The high nobility of Petersburg came. People quite diverse in age and character, but alike in the society they lived in. Prince Vasily's daughter, the beautiful Helene, came to fetch her father and go with him to the fete at the ambassador's. She was wearing a ball gown with a monogram. Evidently. The young little princess Bolkonsky, known as La Femme la plus séduite de Petersburg, also came. Married the previous winter, she did not go into high society now for reason of her pregnancy, but did still go to small soirees.
Seen what I've seen.
Prince
How can I
Hippolyte,
explain?
Prince Vasily's son,
Listen,
came with
you know the nine, how we
Mortemart,
guide
whom he
our fates
introduced.
with an invisible
The Abbé
hand.
Morio also came, and many others. Have you seen
I
yet, or have you made the acquaintance of ma tante? Anna Pavlovna said to the arriving guests, and led them quite seriously to a little old lady in high ribbons who had come sailing out of the next room as soon as the guests began to arrive, calling them by name, slowly shifting her gaze from the guests to ma tante, and then walked away. All the guests performed the ritual of greeting the totally unknown, totally uninteresting, and totally unnecessary aunt. With sad, solemn sympathy, Anna Pavlovna followed their greetings, silently approving of them. To each of them, ma tante spoke in the same expressions about his health, her own health, and the health of Her Majesty, which, thank God, was better that day. And those who went up to her, showing no haste for propriety's sake, left the little old lady with a feeling of relief after the fulfillment of a heavy obligation, never to approach her again.
My dreams grant me no opinions of success.
The young Princess
Their compass
Bolkonsky
ventures
came with
not
handwork in a
beyond
gold-embroidered velvet bag.
But in your
Her
fate,
pretty upper lip,
I
with its
hold the
barely
sun's
visible
companion.
black mustache, was
The
too
dawn
short
of
for her teeth.
Akatosha's bright
But the more
glory
sweetly it did
banished the
open, and
coming
still more sweetly
darkness.
did it sometimes stretch and close on a
With
lower
such
one.
hope, and with the promise
As
of
perhaps
my
with
aid,
perfectly,
my
as
heart
perhaps
must be satisfied.
as happens with perfectly attractive women, her flaw, a
No
short lip
trophies
and a
of my
half-open
triumph
mouth,
precede me,
seemed her
but
special
I have
personal
lived
beauty.
well.
Everyone
My
felt
ghost
cheerful looking at
shall
this
rest
pretty future mother full of health and
Men are
liveliness,
but flesh
who
and
bore her
blood.
conditions so
They know
easily.
their doom.
To old men and to
Not
bored,
the
morose
power.
young men, it seemed that they
In
themselves
this
came
I
to
am
resemble
blessed
her,
to see
having
the
been with
hour
her
of
and
my
spoken
death,
with her for a time.
to face
Anyone
my
who talked with her and
apportioned
saw her
fate,
bright little smile at
down
every word
fall.
and her gleaming white teeth, which showed
I
constantly,
go to
thought
my
himself
grave,
especially
a tongue
amiable that
shriller
day,
than all
and
the
that is what
music
each of
called
them
me.
thought.
You shall follow
The
me
little
for a
princess,
while.
waddling,
Then we
went
must part.
around the table with small, quick steps, her bag of handwork
You
hanging
may
on
as
her
well make
arm,
yourself
and
useful.
cheerfully straightened her
Carry that
dress,
torch and stick
sat down on
close.
the sofa near the silver samovar, looking as though everything she did was a partie de plaisir for her and for everyone around her.
Situations like this.
J'apporte mon ouvrage, she said, unclasping her reticule and
My job
addressing
is to
them
make
all
sure the
together.
emperor
Look,
gets
Annette,
you're alive and I
ne
intend
me
to-
juge pas un mauvais tour. She turned to the hostess.
Stick close.
Vous m'avez écrit que était un tout petit soirée voyage comme je suis à tes filles. And she spread her arms to show her elegant gray lace-trimmed dress tied slightly below the breast with broad ribbons. Soyez tranquilles, vous serez toujours la plus jolie, Anna Pavlovna replied. Vous savez, mon mari m'a abandonné, she went on in the same tone, turning to a general. Il va se faire tout. Dis-moi pourquoi cette vilaine gueule, she said to Prince Vasily, and not waiting for an answer, turned to Prince Vasily's daughter, the beautiful Hélène. Quelle délicieuse personne que cette petite princesse, Prince Vasily said to Anna Pavlovna. Soon after the little princess came, a massive fat young man with a cropped head, in spectacles, light-colored trousers of the latest fashion, a high jabot, and a brown tailcoat. This fat young man was the illegitimate son of a famous courtier from Catherine's time, Count Bezukhov, who was now dying in Moscow. He did not serve anywhere yet. He had only just arrived from abroad where he had been educated, and this was his first time in society. Anna Pavlovna greeted him with a nod reserved for people of the lowest hierarchy in her salon. But despite this greeting of the lowest sort, at the sight of the entering Pierre, uneasiness and fear showed in Anna Pavlovna's face, like that expressed at the sight of something all too enormous and unsuited to the place.
Take a look.
Though Pierre was indeed somewhat larger than the other men in the room, this fear could have referred only to the intelligent, at the same time shy, observant, and natural gaze which distinguished him from everyone else in the drawing room. C'est bien amiable à vous, Monsieur Pierre, d'être venu voir un pauvre malade, Anna Pavlovna said to him, exchanging fearful looks with the aunt to whom she was bringing him. Pierre burbled something incomprehensible and went on searching for something with his eyes. He smiled joyfully, merrily, bowed to the little princess as to a close acquaintance, and went up to the aunt. Anna Pavlovna's fear was not in vain, because Pierre, without hearing out the aunt's talk about Her Majesty's health, walked away from her. The frightened Anna Pavlovna stopped him with the words, "You don't know about the Abbé Moreau? He's a very interesting man," she said. "Yes, I've heard about his plan for eternal peace, and it's very interesting, but hardly possible."
You think so?
"You think so?" said Anna Pavlovna, in order to say something, and again turned to her duties as mistress of the
I
house.
can go no further.
But Pierre
You
committed
alone
the
must stand against
reverse
the Prince of
discourtesy.
Destruction and his more
Earlier he had
essentials.
walked away
You
upon
must
hearing
not
out
have
a
the
lady who was
amulet of
talking to him.
kings.
Now he held with his conversation
Take
to a
the
lady
amulet,
who needed
give
to
it
leave
to
him.
Joffrey. He
Lowering
alone
his head
knows
and
where to
spreading
find
his
my
big feet,
last
he
son.
began to explain to Anna Pavlovna
Find him,
why
and
he
close
thought that the
shut
Abbé's
the
plan was
doors
a
of
chimera.
Oblivion.
"We'll talk later," Anna Pavlovna said, smiling. And ridding herself of the young man who did not know how to live, she returned to her duties as mistress of the house and went on listening and looking out, ready to come to the rescue at any point where the conversation lagged. As the owner of a spinning mill, having put his workers in their places, strolls about the establishment, watching out for an idle spindle or the odd one squealing much too loudly, and hastens to go and slow it down or start it up at the proper speed. So Anna Pavlovna strolled about her drawing room, going up to a circle that had fallen silent or was too talkative, and with one word or rearrangement set the conversation machine running evenly and properly again. But amidst all these cares, there could still be seen in her a special fear for Pierre. She glanced at him concernedly when he went over to listen to what was being talked about around Montmartre, and went on to another circle where the Abbé was talking. For Pierre, brought up abroad, this soirée of Anna Pavlovna's was the first he had seen in Russia. He knew that all the intelligentsia of Petersburg was gathered here, and like a child in a toy shop, he looked everywhere at once. He kept fearing to miss intelligent conversations that he might have listened to. Looking at the self-assured and elegant expressions on the faces gathered here, he kept expecting something especially intelligent. Finally, he went up to Moreau. The conversation seemed interesting to him, and he stopped, waiting for a chance to voice his thoughts, as young people like to do.
Through that door must be the
Part
entrance to
3.
the sewers past the locked gate.
Or
That's
Section
where we're
3.
heading.
Sorry.
It's a secret way out of the Imperial.
Anna
City.
Pavlovna's soiree
It's
got
supposed to be
going.
secret.
The spindles on all sides hummed evenly and ceaselessly. Besides Montante, next to whom sat only one elderly lady with a thin, weepy face,
But from
somewhat
what you
alien
said,
to this
I'm
brilliant
guessing you're an
company.
experienced
The
ruler.
company had broken up into 3 circles. In one, mostly masculine, the center was the Abbé. In another, of young people. It was the beautiful Princess Helene, Prince Vasily's daughter, and the pretty red-cheeked little Princess Bolkonsky, too plump for her age. In the third, it was Montmartre and Anna Pavlovna. The Viscount was a nice-looking young man with soft features and manners, obviously regarded himself as a celebrity, but from good breeding, modestly allowed himself to be made use of by the company in which he found himself.
I don't think you'll have any
Anna
trouble
Pavlovna was
tracking it.
obviously treating her guest to him. As a good maître d'hôtel presents as something supernaturally excellent, a piece of beef one would not want to eat if one saw it in the dirty kitchen, so that evening Anna Pavlovna served up to her guests
Good.
first the
The
Vicomte,
Emperor's
then the
trust was
Abbé,
well placed.
as something supernaturally
I'll stay
refined.
here to guard the
In
Emperor.
Montmartre circles, the conversation turned at once to the murder of the Duc de Enghien. The Vicomte said that the Duc de Enghien had perished from his own magnanimity, and that there were special reasons for Bonaparte's viciousness. Ah, voyons, Comtesse non c'est la Vicomte, said Anna Pavlovna, joyfully sensing that something à la Louis XV echoed in this phrase. Comtesse non c'est la Vicomte. The Vicomte bowed as a sign of submission and smiled politely. Anna Pavlovna circled around the Vicomte and invited everyone to listen to his story. Le Vicomte a été personnellement connu de monsieur, Anna Pavlovna whispered to one. Le Vicomte est un parfait conteur, she said to another. Comme on voit l'homme de la bonne compagnie, she said to a third. And the Vicomte was presented to the company in a most refined and advantageous light.
Well, that was a really fun one. Begin by simply listening, slow down, see just how peaceful today can be. Really fun. There she is. Thanks to Charlotte Ghigliazza for War and Peace. And thanks to Bethesda for Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Begin by simply listening, slow down, see just how peaceful today can be. Catch you guys on closely.
Like a roast beef on a hot platter sprinkled with herbs. The Viscount was just about to begin his story and smiled subtly. Come over here, cher Hélène. Chérie Hélène, Anna Pavlovna said to the beautiful princess, who was sitting some way off, forming the center of another circle. Princess Hélène was smiling. She got up with the same unchanging smile of a perfectly beautiful woman with which she had entered the drawing room. Lightly wrestling her white ball gown trimmed with ivy and moss, her white shoulders gleaming, her hair and diamonds shining, she walked straight on between the parted men, not looking at anyone but smiling to everyone, as if kindly granting each of them the right to admire the beauty of her figure, of her full shoulders, of her very exposed bosom and back, as the fashion then was, and as if bringing with her the brilliance of a ball, approached Anna Pavlovna. Hélène was so good-looking that there was not only not a trace of coquetry to be seen in her, but on the contrary, it was as if she was embarrassed by her unquestionable and all too strong